The dust that clung to Diana Navarro's traveling dress felt like shame made tangible, settling into every fiber as she stumbled down the dirt road leading away from her childhood home, carrying nothing but a small carpet bag and the life growing inside her. Her father's final words still rang in her ears like church bells announcing a funeral, his voice hard as the Colorado mountains that surrounded their ranch outside Westcliff. "No daughter of mine carries a bastard under my roof." The door had slammed with such finality that she'd felt it in her bones, and now the October afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she walked, not knowing where her feet would take her, only knowing she couldn't stop moving or she'd collapse right there on the road. She'd made it perhaps 3 miles when the nausea hit again, that familiar rolling sickness that had been her constant companion for weeks now. Diana stumbled to the side of the road, dropping to her knees behind a scraggly juniper bush, retching until there was nothing left. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the dust and sweat, and for a moment she let herself break completely, sobbing into her hands as the weight of her situation crashed over her like an avalanche. Thomas had promised her everything, had whispered sweet words under the stars about their future together, and then he'd vanished the moment she'd told him about the baby. Gone to seek his fortune in California, his brother had said with apologetic eyes. She'd been a fool, and now she was paying the price. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Diana quickly wiped her face, trying to compose herself even though she knew she must look like something dragged behind a wagon. A rider approached from the direction of town, sitting tall in the saddle on a beautiful bay mare. As he drew closer, Diana could make out his features. A man perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly under his worn Stetson. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He slowed his horse as he approached, concern evident in his expression. "Madam, are you all right?" His voice was deep and warm, carrying genuine worry rather than judgment. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his whole life on horseback, landing lightly despite his solid build. "You look like you could use some help." Diana tried to stand, but her legs wobbled beneath her. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and that had been just a piece of dry bread she'd forced down before the morning sickness hit. "I'm fine, thank you. Just resting a moment before I continue on to town." The cowboy's eyes swept over her, taking in the quality traveling dress now covered in dust, the expensive carpet bag that was her only possession, and the tear-stained face she couldn't quite hide. His expression softened even more. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you don't look fine at all. Name's Garrett Miller. I run a ranch about 2 miles back toward the mountains." He gestured in the direction she'd been walking away from. "Have you got people waiting for you in town? Somewhere to stay?" The kindness in his voice nearly undid her completely. Diana felt fresh tears threatening and fought them back with every ounce of strength she had left. "I'll manage, Mr. Miller. I don't wish to trouble anyone with my problems." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. Garrett studied her for a long moment, and Diana had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her brave facade to the terrified woman beneath. "Look, I don't know your situation, and it's not my business unless you want to tell me, but I can see you're in some kind of trouble, and no decent man leaves a lady stranded on the road when she's clearly unwell. There's a storm coming in tonight. You can see the clouds building over the peaks. Please, at least let me take you into town, maybe to the hotel or the boarding house." Diana looked up at the mountains and saw he was right. Dark clouds were gathering, the kind that brought the cold autumn rains that could chill you to the bone. She had maybe $15 to her name, enough for a few nights at a boarding house if she was lucky. But then what? She had no skills beyond managing a household, no references she could use without her father finding out where she'd gone, and in a few months she'd be obviously pregnant and unmarriageable. The hopelessness of it all pressed down on her chest like a physical weight. "I don't have anywhere to go," she heard herself whisper, the admission tearing out of her like a confession. "My father, he threw me out because I'm with child. The father of the baby, he's gone. I have no family, no prospects, nothing. I thought I could make it to town, find some kind of work, but I don't even know if anyone would hire me in my condition." The words tumbled out faster now, months of fear and shame spilling over. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. You've been kind, and I appreciate the offer of a ride to town. I'll figure something out once I get there." Garrett's face had gone very still as she spoke, but there was no disgust in his eyes, no judgment. Instead, he looked thoughtful, almost calculating, as if working through a problem in his head. Finally, he spoke, his words slow and deliberate. "My ranch has room for you both." Diana's head snapped up, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "My ranch," Garrett repeated, meeting her eyes steadily. "It's not fancy, but it's solid. Got a main house that's way too big for just me. Built it thinking I'd have a family by now. I've got 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, but they're good men, respectful. I could use someone to manage the household, do the cooking and such. The work's not easy, but it's honest, and you'd have a roof over your head and food on the table. Both you and the baby would be safe there." Diana stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You don't even know me. Why would you make such an offer?" Garrett's expression grew distant for a moment, as if he was seeing something from his past. "My sister Emily got herself in a similar situation 5 years back. The father of her baby disappeared, and her husband's family. They were cruel about it, threw her out without a penny. She tried to make it on her own, but by the time I found out what happened and went looking for her, it was too late. She died giving birth in some charity hospital in Denver, and the baby with her." His voice had gone rough with old grief. "I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in that kind of situation, I would. So that's what I'm doing. This isn't charity. It's offering you honest work. You'd earn your keep." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and something in Diana's chest loosened slightly. She'd been prepared for judgment, for condemnation, for doors slammed in her face. Instead, this stranger was offering her salvation. "I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Miller, but I should be honest with you. I've managed my father's household for years, so I know how to cook and clean and run a home, but I've never worked for wages before, and people will talk. A single woman living on a bachelor's ranch." "Let them talk," Garrett said firmly. "Folks in Westcliff know me, know I'm an honest man, and if it bothers you that much, we can tell people you're a distant cousin who needed help. But honestly, Miss Navarro, Diana Navarro. Miss Navarro, honestly, I don't care much what the gossips say. What matters is that you need help, and I can provide it. Now, will you let me take you to the ranch, at least for tonight? You can see the place, meet the hands, and decide if you want to stay. If you don't like it, I'll drive you into town tomorrow myself and help you find other arrangements. Fair enough?" Diana looked into his steady brown eyes and saw nothing but genuine kindness. She was out of options, out of strength, and the baby growing inside her needed protection, even if she didn't deserve it herself. "Fair enough," she whispered, "and thank you, Mr. Miller. You're saving our lives." "Call me Garrett," he said, offering her a small smile. "And you're going to save yourself, Miss Navarro. I'm just providing the opportunity." He helped her to her feet with a gentle hand under her elbow, then retrieved her carpet bag. "Can you ride? We can double up on Juniper here. Or I can walk and you can ride if you're not comfortable." "I can ride," Diana said, grateful that at least her father had taught her that much. Garrett mounted first, then reached down and pulled her up behind him with surprising ease. Diana hesitated for just a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. It was strange to be this close to a man she'd just met, but there was something reassuring about his steadiness, the way he sat so confidently in the saddle. They rode in silence for a while, heading back the way Diana had come, but turning off onto a smaller trail that led up into the foothills. The land here was beautiful in a stark way, all golden grassland dotted with dark green juniper and pine, with the massive peaks of the Sangre de Cristo range rising up to the west like sentinels. Diana had lived in this valley all her life, but she'd never been to this particular part of it. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked, partly to break the silence and partly because she genuinely wanted to know more about this man who was helping her. "Bought the land 6 years ago, when I was 21, Garrett replied, his voice rumbling through his chest. "Spent 2 years building it up, running cattle, getting established. Did well enough that I built the big house 4 years back, figuring I'd be married by now. Had my eye on a girl in town, Sarah Matthews, thought we understood each other. Turned out she understood my bank account more than she understood me. She married a merchant from Denver with better prospects." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a matter-of-fact acceptance. After that, I put my energy into the ranch instead of courting. Been too busy to think much about marriage. I'm sorry, Diana said softly. That must have hurt. It did at the time, Garrett admitted, but now I think it was probably for the best. Sarah wanted city life, parties, fancy things. I'm a rancher through and through. We wouldn't have made each other happy. He was quiet for a moment, then added, What about you? The father of your baby, was he from around here? Diana felt her throat tighten. Thomas Whitley. His father owns the feed store in town. We'd been courting for 6 months, and I thought he loved me. He said he loved me, promised we'd get married come spring. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I believed him. When I told him about the baby, he said he needed time to think, to figure things out. 3 days later, his brother told me he'd left for California. Didn't even have the courage to tell me himself. He's a coward and a fool, Garrett said flatly. Any man who'd abandon his responsibilities like that isn't worth your tears. My father said it was my fault, Diana continued, the words pouring out now that she'd started. Said I'd tempted Thomas, that I'd brought shame on the family. He gave me 1 hour to pack my things and leave. My mother, she just stood there crying, didn't say a word to defend me. My younger brother tried to speak up, but father silenced him. It was like I'd died to them, like I'd never existed at all. Garrett's back tensed with anger. Your father's wrong. Takes 2 people to make a baby, and the man's the one who should be held accountable, not the woman. But men like your father, they never see it that way. He half turned in the saddle to look at her, his expression fierce. You listen to me, Diana. You didn't do anything wrong by loving someone and trusting them. The wrong was Thomas leaving you, and your father turning you out. You hear me? Diana felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were different. These weren't tears of shame or despair, but something closer to relief. For weeks, she'd carried the weight of guilt and self-blame, believing everything her father had said about her wickedness and foolishness. To have someone look her in the eye and tell her she wasn't to blame felt like absolution. Thank you, she managed to say. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. They crested a small rise, and Garrett pointed ahead. There it is, the Miller Ranch. Diana looked and felt her breath catch. The ranch was nestled in a small valley between 2 ridges, protected from the worst of the weather. The main house was indeed large, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. It was well maintained, with fresh chinking between the logs and a solid roof. Nearby stood a substantial barn, several corrals with good fencing, and a smaller bunkhouse. She could see cattle grazing in the distance, and closer to the barn, several horses in a paddock. As they rode into the yard, 3 men emerged from the barn, clearly curious about their boss bringing home a visitor. Garrett dismounted and helped Diana down, his hands firm on her waist as he steadied her. Diana, these are my hands. That's Red Sullivan. He's been with me since the beginning. He indicated a wiry man with flame-red hair and a friendly, weathered face. Next to him is Carlos Mendoza, best horse handler in the valley. A stocky man with a black mustache nodded politely to Diana. And the young one is Ben Parker, just started with us this summer. Ben couldn't have been more than 19, with an open, honest face that broke into a warm smile as he tipped his hat to Diana. All 3 men looked curious but polite, their gazes respectful. Boys, this is Miss Diana Navarro. She's going to be managing the house and doing the cooking for us. I want you to treat her with respect and help her with anything she needs. Anyone have a problem with that? No problem at all, boss, Red said, his Irish accent becoming apparent. Be nice to have some decent cooking around here. No offense to your attempts, Garrett, but your biscuits could be used as cannonballs. The other men chuckled, and even Diana found herself smiling slightly. Garrett shook his head ruefully. Can't argue with that. Ben, take care of Juniper for me, would you? Diana, let me show you the house. He led her up the porch steps and through the front door, and Diana stepped into a space that took her breath away. The main room was large and open, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, clearly built by someone who knew their craft. Large windows let in plenty of light, and the whole space had good bones, even if it was obviously lacking a woman's touch. Everything was clean but spare, functional but not comfortable. Kitchen's through here, Garrett said, leading her through a doorway into a spacious kitchen with a large cook stove, a good-sized table, and more cabinets than Diana had expected. I'll be honest, I mostly eat in here rather than the dining room. Seems foolish to use that big table when it's just me. He opened another door. This is the pantry. Should have everything you need, but you can make a list if there's anything missing. Diana looked around the kitchen, her mind already cataloging what was there and what would make the space more efficient. Despite everything, she felt a small spark of interest. This could be her domain, a place where she could be useful and productive. Bedrooms are upstairs, Garrett continued, heading back through the main room to a sturdy staircase. There are 4 rooms up here. Mine's at the end of the hall. I thought you could take this one here. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a large bed covered in a simple quilt, a dresser, a wardrobe, and a chair by the window. It's got a good view of the mountains, and it's close to the stairs in case you need anything during the night. Diana stepped into the room and felt something inside her crack open. It was more than she'd dared hope for, a real room with a real bed and privacy. She set down her carpet bag and moved to the window, looking out at the spectacular view of the mountains turning gold in the late afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Garrett, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," he said from the doorway. "You're going to earn this, I promise you that. Running a household and cooking for 4 men is no small job. But for tonight, you just rest. You've had a terrible day, and you look exhausted. There's a washroom at the end of the hall with a basin and pitcher. I'll have the boys bring up some hot water so you can wash up. We usually eat around 6, but tonight I'll just make some sandwiches so you don't have to worry about cooking." "I can cook," Diana protested. "That's what I'm here for." "You can start tomorrow," Garrett said firmly. "Tonight, you recover. That's an order from your employer." His voice was gentle but brooking no argument. "Get some rest. Diana, things will look better after you've slept and eaten." After he left, Diana sank down onto the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of the day. She'd woken up that morning in her childhood bedroom, still hoping that somehow her father would relent, would tell her he'd been angry, but that she could stay. Instead, he'd told her to pack and get out, and she'd become homeless in the span of an hour. But now, impossibly, she had a room of her own and a job and a chance at a future. She pressed her hand to her still flat stomach and whispered, "We're going to be all right. I promise you, little one, we're going to be all right." True to his word, Ben knocked on her door a few minutes later with a bucket of hot water, his eyes carefully averted as he set it down inside the washroom. Diana cleaned herself up as best she could, washing away the dust and tears, and changed into a simpler dress from her bag. When she came downstairs, she found the men gathered around the kitchen table, and Garrett had indeed made sandwiches along with some canned beans heated on the stove. The meal was simple but filling, and the men's conversation was easy and uncomplicated. They talked about the ranch work, about the cattle that needed to be moved to winter pasture soon, about a fence that needed mending in the north section. They treated Diana with careful respect, including her in the conversation but not pushing when she stayed quiet. It was clear they were curious about her, but Garrett had given them enough information that they weren't asking awkward questions. After dinner, Diana insisted on at least washing the dishes, and Garrett didn't argue. As she stood at the sink, scrubbing plates while he dried, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. This wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself. She'd pictured marriage to Thomas, a little house in town, maybe children eventually when they could afford them. Instead, she was an unwed mother working as a housekeeper on a ranch. But looking around the warm kitchen, listening to the sound of rain beginning to patter on the roof as that storm rolled in, Diana realized she felt safer than she had in weeks. Maybe this wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life, and it was hers. The days settled into a rhythm faster than Diana expected. She woke early each morning to start breakfast for the men, usually simple fare like eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee, but made with care. The ranch hands were effusive in their praise, declaring her the best cook they'd ever had, which Diana suspected said more about their previous meals than her skills. After breakfast, the men would head out for the day's work, and Diana would begin her household tasks. The house needed a woman's touch desperately, and Diana threw herself into the work with fierce determination. She scrubbed floors that probably hadn't seen a proper cleaning in years, washed windows until they sparkled, and organized the kitchen and pantry with ruthless efficiency. She aired out rooms, beat rugs, and polished furniture. It was hard physical work, but Diana welcomed it. When she was working, she didn't have time to think about Thomas or her father, or the uncertain future. Garrett watched her efforts with a mixture of gratitude and concern. On the third evening, as she was preparing to tackle the dining room that he'd admitted hadn't been used in over a year, he stopped her gently. "Diana, you don't have to do all of this at once. The house has been neglected for years. It can wait a few more weeks." "I need to keep busy," Diana admitted, pausing with a dust cloth in her hand. "When I stop working, I start thinking, and when I start thinking, I start worrying. This way, at least I'm useful." Garrett studied her with those perceptive brown eyes. "You're more than useful. You've transformed this place in 3 days, but you need to take care of yourself too, and the baby. Don't work yourself to exhaustion." It was the first time he'd mentioned the baby directly since that first day, and Diana felt her hand move unconsciously to her stomach. "I'm being careful," she assured him. "I know my limits." "Do you?" Garrett asked softly. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're trying to prove something. You don't have to earn the right to be here, Diana. You're here because you need to be, and that's enough." His words hit closer to home than Diana wanted to admit. She was trying to prove something, trying to show that she was worth the help he had given her, that she wasn't the shameful burden her father had called her. "Old habits," she said, attempting a smile. "My father always said idle hands were the devil's workshop." "Your father said a lot of things that were wrong," Garrett replied. "How about this? You work at a reasonable pace during the day, but evenings are for resting. After dinner, you sit in the parlor and relax, read a book, do needlework, whatever you enjoy. That's part of your job too, taking care of yourself." Diana wanted to argue, but the firmness in his voice stopped her. "All right," she agreed. "But only if you sit with me. That parlor is too big and empty for just one person." Something flickered across Garrett's face, an expression Diana couldn't quite read. "Deal," he said finally. "I'll even teach you to play chess if you want. Fair warning, though, I'm terrible at it. Red beats me every time." That became their new evening routine. After dinner and cleanup, Diana and Garrett would retire to the parlor while the ranch hands headed to the bunkhouse. At first, their conversation was stilted and careful, both of them aware of the unusual nature of their arrangement. But gradually, as the days turned into weeks, they began to relax around each other. Diana learned that Garrett had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 children. His father had been a rancher too, and Garrett had learned the trade from childhood. He'd come to Colorado seeking his own land and independence, drawn by the territory's opportunities and spectacular landscapes. He loved ranching with a passion that was evident in every word he spoke about the work. He could talk for hours about breeding lines for cattle, about the best grazing lands, about the economics of running a successful ranch. In turn, Diana found herself opening up about her own life. She told him about growing up as the oldest child in the Navarro family, about the pressure to be perfect, to set an example for her younger siblings. She talked about her mother's weakness, her father's harsh discipline, the way nothing she did ever seemed quite good enough. She even talked about Thomas, about the whirlwind courtship that had seemed so romantic at the time and now just seemed foolish. "He wasn't all bad," she said one evening in late October as they sat by the fire, rain drumming against the windows. "At first, he was charming and attentive. He said beautiful things and made me feel special. I think part of me knew it was too good to be true, but I wanted so badly to believe it." "You weren't foolish for believing someone who claimed to love you," Garrett said, looking up from the chessboard where he was pondering his next move. "That's what you're supposed to do when someone says they love you. Trust is the foundation of love. Thomas broke that trust, but that's his failing, not yours." Diana moved her bishop, capturing his knight. "Check." Garrett groaned and studied the board with exaggerated despair. "How are you beating me? You'd never played chess before 2 weeks ago." "Maybe you're just a very good teacher," Diana said with a small smile, the first real smile that had come easily to her in months. "Or maybe you're as terrible as you warned me you were." "Definitely the second one," Garrett admitted, moving his king out of danger. "Red's going to love hearing that I'm losing to a beginner." "I'm not a beginner anymore," Diana pointed out. "I'm an intermediate player who learned from someone with very predictable strategies." Garrett laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the room. Diana realized with a start that she loved making him laugh, loved the way his whole face transformed when he was amused. He was a serious man by nature, focused and responsible, but when he laughed, he looked younger, more carefree. As November arrived, the weather turned colder, and Diana's pregnancy became more evident. She'd let out the seams of her dresses as far as they would go, but she was going to need new clothes soon. Garrett noticed her struggling with a button one morning and brought it up at breakfast. "We need to go into town today," he announced. "Diana needs proper winter clothes and some dresses that will accommodate her condition. I need to check in at the bank and pick up some supplies anyway." Diana froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "I can't go into town. Someone might recognize me. My father might be there." "You can't hide on the ranch forever," Garrett said gently. "Besides, you need clothes. We can be quick about it, in and out. Mrs. Henderson runs the dress shop, and she's discreet. She won't ask questions or spread gossip. But what will people think seeing me with you? My father might hear that I'm living at your ranch." "Let him hear it," Garrett said flatly. "What's he going to do? Throw you out again? You're working an honest job for honest wages. There's no shame in that." He paused, then added more softly, "But if you're really worried about it, we can say you're my cousin from Texas who came to help out. That story might make things easier." Diana considered this, her mind racing through the possibilities. She couldn't hide forever, Garrett was right about that. And she did desperately need new clothes. "All right," she agreed finally. "But we tell anyone who asks that I'm your cousin. I don't want to cause problems for you." The ride into Westcliff was tense for Diana, her eyes scanning every person they passed, terrified of running into her father or Thomas or anyone else from her old life. But Garrett kept up a steady stream of conversation about the ranch and the surrounding territory, distracting her from her fears. By the time they reached the main street, Diana had relaxed slightly. Mrs. Henderson's dress shop was a neat little establishment with a cheerful bell that rang as they entered. The proprietress herself emerged from the back, a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile. "Garrett Miller, as I live and breathe. Haven't seen you in town in months. What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Henderson, I'd like you to meet my cousin Diana, visiting from Texas. She needs some practical dresses for winter, and she's in a family way, so they'll need to accommodate that." Mrs. Henderson's eyes swept over Diana with professional assessment, but there was kindness in her gaze. "Of course, dear. Come with me to the back, and we'll take some measurements and see what we can do." She led Diana behind a curtain, leaving Garrett to examine some ready-made shirts. As Mrs. Henderson measured her, Diana waited nervously for the questions, but the older woman simply worked efficiently, calling out numbers to herself and making notes. Finally, she said, "Your cousin is a good man, dear, one of the best in this valley. If you're under his protection, you've got nothing to worry about." Diana felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, madam." "None of that now," Mrs. Henderson said briskly. "Let's get you fixed up properly. I've got 3 dresses I can alter to fit you by the end of the week, and I can make 2 more from scratch in about 10 days. Will that suit?" By the time they left the shop an hour later, Diana felt lighter than she had in weeks. They completed the rest of their errands without incident, though Diana saw several people giving her curious looks. At the general store, the clerk asked how Garrett's cousin was settling in, and Garrett answered smoothly that she was a tremendous help around the ranch. On the way home, Diana turned to him impulsively. "Thank you for that, for protecting my reputation. You didn't have to claim me as family." "Maybe I wanted to," Garrett said quietly. "You've become important to me, Diana. I know we haven't known each other long, but these past few weeks having you at the ranch, it's changed things. The house feels like a home now, instead of just a place to sleep. And I value your company in the evenings more than I can say." Diana's heart began to beat faster. There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, that made her aware of him in a way she'd been trying not to acknowledge. Garrett was handsome and kind and decent. Everything Thomas had pretended to be, but never was. But she was pregnant with another man's child, damaged goods as her father had called her. She couldn't let herself hope for more than what she already had. "I value your company too," she said carefully. "You've been so good to me, Garrett. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you for what you've done." "I don't want repayment," Garrett said, a note of frustration entering his voice. "That's not why I helped you." He was quiet for a moment, then continued more softly. "Diana, I need to be honest with you about something. These feelings I'm developing, they're not just friendship. I admire you tremendously. Your strength, your resilience, the way you've faced everything that's happened with grace and courage. I find myself thinking about you constantly. looking forward to our evenings together. I'm falling for you, and I thought you should know that." Diana's breath caught in her throat. "Garrett, you can't. I'm pregnant with another man's child. I'm ruined, damaged. You deserve someone whole, someone without my history." "You are whole," Garrett said fiercely, pulling the wagon to a stop and turning to face her fully. "What happened to you doesn't diminish you. If anything, it shows your capacity for love and trust. Those are gifts, not flaws." He reached out hesitantly, and when Diana didn't pull away, he took her hand gently. "I'm not asking you to feel the same way I do. I know this is complicated, and I know you've been hurt. I just wanted to be honest about where I stand. But nothing has to change if you don't want it to. You still have a place at the ranch for as long as you need it, regardless of how you feel about me." Diana looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused from ranch work, hers smaller and work-worn from her household tasks. She'd been so determined not to let herself feel anything for him, to keep everything professional and distant. But the truth was, she'd been falling for him too, a little more each day. The way he always made sure she was comfortable, the way he listened when she talked, the way he'd stood up for her when the world had turned its back. She was terrified of being hurt again, but she was also tired of being afraid. "I do feel the same way," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, because it seems impossible. But when I'm with you, I feel safe and valued and seen. You look at me like I'm someone worth knowing, not someone to be ashamed of. I never expected to feel this way about anyone again, especially not so soon. But Garrett, I'm scared. What if this is a mistake? What if you wake up one day and realize you've taken on too much, that you don't want to raise another man's child?" Garrett squeezed her hand gently. "That's not going to happen. I'm going into this with my eyes open, Diana. If we do this, if we make this real, then that baby becomes ours. Not yours alone, not Thomas's ghost, but ours. I'll be that child's father in every way that matters. I'll love them and protect them and raise them as my own. And I'll love you with everything I have." He paused, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I've been alone for a long time. Diana, I thought I was content with just the ranch and my work, but having you here has shown me what I was missing. I don't want to go back to that emptiness." Diana felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of hope rather than despair. "I don't want that either. I don't want to be alone anymore. But we have to take this slowly, Garrett. I need time to heal from everything that happened, and we need to build this relationship on solid ground." "As slow as you need," Garrett promised. "We'll do this right, Diana. No rushing, no pressure. We'll court properly, even if we are living under the same roof. And when you're ready, if you're ready, we'll talk about making it permanent." They spent the rest of the ride home in comfortable silence, hands still clasped between them. Something fundamental had shifted in their relationship, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building for weeks. That night, after dinner, they sat closer together on the sofa, and when Garrett tentatively put his arm around her shoulders, Diana leaned into his warmth, feeling truly safe for the first time since her world had fallen apart. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Diana could remember. She and Garrett navigated their new relationship with care, building on the friendship they had already established. They continued their evening routine, but now it included sitting close together, holding hands, occasional stolen kisses that made Diana's heart race. Garrett was always respectful of her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. The ranch hands noticed the change, of course. It would have been impossible to miss the way Garrett and Diana looked at each other, the gentle touches and soft smiles. But Red, Carlos, and Ben all seemed genuinely happy about the development. One evening, Red pulled Diana aside as she was gathering eggs from the hen house. "Just wanted to say, Miss Diana, we're all real pleased about you and the boss," the Irishman said with a warm smile. "He's been alone too long, and you've brought life back to this place. And don't you worry about anyone in town talking. The boys and I, we've made it clear to anyone who will listen that you're a lady deserving of respect, and anyone who says different will answer to us." Diana was deeply moved by the loyalty of these men who'd been strangers just weeks ago. "Thank you, Red. That means more than you know." As November turned to December, Diana's pregnancy became more obvious. She was nearly 5 months along now, and despite the loose dresses Mrs. Henderson had made, her condition was evident. She felt the baby move for the first time one cold morning while making bread, a flutter like butterfly wings against her ribs. She'd gasped and pressed her hand to her stomach, overwhelmed by the reality of the life growing inside her. That evening, she told Garrett about it as they sat by the fire. "I felt the baby move today. It was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once." Garrett's face lit up with wonder. "Really? What did it feel like?" "Like little flutters, almost like bubbles or butterfly wings." "Here." She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach, though she knew he wouldn't be able to feel anything from the outside yet. "The doctor in Texas, before I left, he said that's normal around this time." Garrett's hand was warm and gentle against her stomach, his expression filled with awe. "That's amazing! There's really a whole person growing in there." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "Diana, I want to marry you, not because of the baby, or because it's the proper thing to do, but because I love you. I want to be your husband and this baby's father. I want us to be a real family." Diana's breath caught. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building between them, but hearing him say the words made it real. "I love you too," she said, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "I tried not to, tried to protect myself, but you made it impossible. You're everything I thought didn't exist, Garrett. You're kind and honorable and true. But are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Once we're married, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me and this child forever." "That's exactly what I want," Garrett said firmly. "Forever with you sounds perfect to me." He stood and crossed to a desk in the corner, returning with a small box. "This was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before I left Texas, said I should have it for when I found the right woman. I'd like you to have it if you'll accept it." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold band set with a small but beautiful sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was lovely and clearly well made, the kind of heirloom passed down through generations. Diana looked at it and then at Garrett, seeing nothing but love and certainty in his eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Garrett's face broke into the biggest smile Diana had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he cupped her face gently and kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that promised everything good in the world. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. "How soon?" Garrett asked. "I don't want to wait if we don't have to." Diana thought about it. In her old life, a wedding would have required months of planning, a big celebration, all the proper social niceties. But that life was gone, and she didn't mourn it. "As soon as we can arrange it. I don't need a fancy wedding, Garrett. I just need you." They were married 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church in Westcliff. The ranch hands served as witnesses, along with Mrs. Henderson and the banker Mr. Foster, who Garrett counted as a friend. Diana wore a new dress in deep blue that complemented her dark hair and accommodated her growing belly. Garrett wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Diana's heart ached with love for him. The pastor, Reverend Williams, was an elderly man with kind eyes who asked no awkward questions about Diana's pregnancy. He spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and bad. When he pronounced them husband and wife, and Garrett kissed her in front of their small gathering, Diana felt a joy so complete it almost frightened her. They held a modest reception at the ranch afterward, with a simple meal that Diana and Mrs. Henderson had prepared together. Red played the fiddle, and they all danced in the parlor, laughing and celebrating. Carlos taught Diana a traditional dance from his family, and Ben kept everyone's glasses filled with the apple cider Diana had made that fall. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Garrett and Diana stood on the porch watching the stars come out. The December night was cold and clear, the sky brilliant with stars that seemed close enough to touch. "Happy?" Garrett asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, one hand settling protectively over her stomach. "More than I ever thought possible," Diana admitted, leaning back against his solid warmth. "This morning, I was Diana Navarro, homeless and desperate. Tonight, I'm Diana Miller, with a husband and a home and a future. It seems like a dream." "It's real," Garrett promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And it's only going to get better. Come spring, we'll have a baby. Next year, maybe we'll expand the herd. 5 years from now, maybe we'll have more children running around. This is just the beginning, Diana." That night, as husband and wife, They shared Garrett's room for the first time. He was gentle and patient, aware of her condition and her past hurts. They made love slowly, carefully, and Diana felt herself healing in ways she hadn't known she needed. This was nothing like her experiences with Thomas, which had been hurried and secretive and tinged with guilt. With Garrett, everything felt right and good and blessed. Winter settled over the ranch in earnest after the wedding. Snow fell in thick blankets, covering the valley in pristine white. The work changed with the season, focusing on maintaining the buildings, caring for the animals that were kept close to the barn, and preparing for spring. Diana spent her days making the house truly theirs, adding touches that transformed it from Garrett's bachelor quarters into a family home. She sewed curtains for the windows, made quilts and pillows, arranged furniture to create cozy spaces. The nursery became her special project. The room next to the master bedroom had been empty, and Diana threw herself into preparing it. Garrett built a beautiful cradle from cherry wood, carving it carefully in the evenings, while Diana sewed tiny gowns and blankets. They painted the walls a soft yellow that would suit either a boy or a girl. In late January, Diana received an unexpected visitor. She was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard a knock at the door. Garrett was in the barn, and the hands were out checking on the cattle, so Diana answered it herself. She opened the door to find her younger brother Miguel standing on the porch, hat in hand, looking nervous and cold. "Miguel," she breathed, shock and joy warring in her chest. She hadn't seen him since the day their father threw her out, hadn't dared hope that any of her family would reach out to her. "Come in, you must be freezing." Miguel stepped inside, his eyes taking in the warm, comfortable house. "Diana, I had to see you. Father would kill me if he knew I was here, but I couldn't stay away any longer. Maria Henderson told me you'd married Garrett Miller." His eyes dropped to her obvious pregnancy. "Are you all right? Are you happy?" "I'm very happy," Diana assured him, leading him to the kitchen and pouring him hot coffee. "Garrett is a good man, Miguel. He's been wonderful to me. But tell me about you, about Mother and the others. How are they?" Miguel's face darkened. "Mother cries all the time, but she won't stand up to Father. He's forbidden us from even speaking your name. Sophia and little Carlos ask about you constantly, and I've run out of ways to explain why you're gone. Father says you're dead to us, but Diana, you're my sister. I love you, and I needed to know you were safe." Diana felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I'm safe, and I'm loved. Garrett knows everything about my situation, and he married me anyway. He's going to raise the baby as his own. I never thought I'd be this fortunate." They talked for over an hour, catching up on family news and Diana's new life. She told him about the ranch, about the kindness of Garrett and his hands, about her hopes for the future. When Garrett came in for lunch and found them, he greeted Miguel warmly, seeming to understand immediately how important this visit was. Before Miguel left, Diana pressed a letter into his hands. "Give this to Mother when Father isn't around. Tell her I forgive her for not defending me, and that I understand she was afraid. Tell her she can visit any time she wants, and that she'll always have a place here if she needs it." Miguel hugged her tightly. "I'll tell her, and Diana, I'm happy for you. You deserve all the good things in the world." He shook hands with Garrett. "Take care of her, sir. She's the best person I know." "I will," Garrett promised. "And Miguel, you're welcome here any time. Family means something in this house." February arrived with a fierce blizzard that trapped them all indoors for 3 days. Diana, now 7 months pregnant and moving more slowly, spent the time cooking enormous meals and organizing the last details of the nursery. The forced confinement could have been tense, but instead it became almost festive. The ranch hands joined them in the main house, and they played cards, told stories, and enjoyed being warm and well-fed while the storm raged outside. Red regaled them with tales of his childhood in Ireland, stories so elaborate and unlikely that everyone suspected he was embellishing liberally. Carlos taught them Spanish songs his grandmother had sung to him. Ben, the youngest, talked shyly about the girl he was sweet on in town, and asked Diana's advice about courting, which she gave with as much wisdom as she could muster. Garrett watched it all with deep contentment, his hand frequently finding Diana's, their eyes meeting across the room with shared understanding. This was the family they were building, not just the two of them and the baby coming soon, but this whole community of people who cared for each other. When the storm finally broke, revealing a landscape transformed by snow, They all pitched in to dig out paths and check on the animals. Everything had weathered the storm well, testament to Garrett's careful preparations. Diana stood on the porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl, and marveled at the beauty of the snow-covered valley gleaming in the sunlight. Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her as he so often did. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About how far I've come," Diana said. "6 months ago, I was standing on a road, homeless and terrified, certain my life was over. Now, I'm standing here with a husband I love, in a home that's truly mine, waiting for a baby who will be cherished and wanted. It's almost too much good fortune to believe." "Believe it," Garrett said firmly. "You deserve every bit of this happiness, Diana. And there's more to come, so much more." He was right. In early March, after a labor that was long and difficult but ultimately successful, Diana gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Garrett was there throughout, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, speaking encouragement when she was certain she couldn't go on. When the doctor finally placed the baby in her arms, Diana looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt love so fierce it was almost painful. "He's beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Garrett, look at him. He's perfect." Garrett, who had cried openly when the baby was born, leaned over them both, his face filled with wonder. "He is perfect. Have you thought about names?" They'd discussed this many times over the past months. Diana had been certain the baby should carry Garrett's name in some way, but Garrett had argued that they should choose something they both loved. In the end, they'd compromised. "Daniel," Diana said softly. "Daniel Garrett Miller. So he has your name, but also his own identity." "Daniel," Garrett repeated, reaching out to stroke the baby's downy head with one gentle finger. "Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world, son. We've been waiting for you." The word son made Diana's heart clench with gratitude and love. Garrett wasn't claiming this child out of obligation or duty. He truly meant it. Daniel was his son, and he would raise him with the same love and devotion he showed Diana. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Daniel was a good baby overall, but he still needed constant care, and Diana often found herself bone-tired by evening. But Garrett was a devoted father, taking the baby whenever he could to give Diana a break, walking the floor with him during fussy periods, changing nappies without complaint, and gazing at his son with undisguised adoration. The ranch hands doted on Daniel too. Red carved him toys and sang Irish lullabies that put the baby right to sleep. Carlos taught Daniel Spanish words before he could even understand language, determined that the boy would grow up bilingual. Ben declared himself the best uncle a kid could ask for, and took his role very seriously. In May, as wildflowers bloomed across the valley and the cattle were driven to their summer pastures, Diana's mother came to visit. She arrived unannounced one afternoon, looking nervous and worn. Diana, who was hanging laundry with Daniel, sleeping in a basket nearby, saw her coming and felt her heart leap. "Mother," she said, not knowing what else to say, all the hurt and abandonment she'd felt, warring with the love she still bore this woman. "Diana," her mother Elena whispered, tears already falling. "My baby girl, I'm so sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for not standing by you when you needed me. I was a coward, and I let your father throw you out when I should have fought for you." Diana felt her own tears start. "You're here now. That's what matters." They embraced, both of them crying, and then Elena pulled back to look at her daughter properly. "You look happy, healthy. Garrett Miller must be treating you well." "He treats me like I'm precious," Diana said softly. "He's everything a husband should be, Mother, and he loves Daniel like his own blood." "May I see him?" Elena asked hopefully, looking at the basket where the baby slept. Diana lifted Daniel gently and placed him in his grandmother's arms. Elena gazed down at the baby with wonder, tracing his features with tender fingers. "He's beautiful. He has your eyes, Diana, but his chin is different. He'll be a handsome man when he grows up." They went inside, and Diana made tea while her mother cuddled Daniel, who woke up and regarded this new person with solemn interest. Elena told Diana about the family, about how miserable things had been since Diana left. Miguel had become rebellious, arguing constantly with their father. Sophia cried herself to sleep asking for Diana. Even their father, Elena admitted, seemed diminished somehow, though he would never admit regret. "I can't leave him," Elena said sadly. "I know I should. I know what he did was unforgivable, but I have nowhere to go, no way to support myself and the younger children. You could come here, Diana offered immediately. Garrett already said you'd be welcome. There's plenty of room, Mother. You and Sophia and Carlos could have a real home here, away from Father's anger. Elena looked tempted, but ultimately shook her head. I can't take the little ones from their father, no matter how harsh he is. And I made vows, Diana. I have to honor them. But I'm going to visit you regularly if you'll have me. And when the children are older, when they can make their own choices, I'll tell them where you are and let them decide for themselves about maintaining contact. It wasn't everything Diana wanted, but it was something. They spent the afternoon together, and when Garrett came in for dinner, he greeted Elena warmly and insisted she stay for the meal. The evening was pleasant, and by the time Elena left, she was smiling for the first time in months. You have a good man, she told Diana at the door. Hold on to him and build the life your father and I never could. Be happy, my darling girl. You deserve it. True to her word, Elena visited regularly after that, usually when Diana's father was away at market or dealing with ranch business. She never brought the younger children, too afraid of her husband's wrath, but she brought news and love and gradually began to heal the rift between them. Summer passed in a haze of heat and hard work and family life. Diana thrived in her role as wife and mother, and Garrett's ranch continued to prosper. They hired an additional hand to help with the expanded herd, a quiet man named Luke who'd recently arrived from Wyoming. The household grew more chaotic and more joyful with each passing month. Daniel grew from an infant into a chubby, cheerful baby who laughed at everything and everyone. His first word was, "Da," directed at Garrett, who looked so proud and emotional that Diana had to laugh even as she cried. The baby adored his father, reaching for him the moment Garrett came into view, and Garrett was utterly smitten with his son. On a warm August evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Daniel played with blocks at their feet, Diana turned to Garrett with a soft smile. I have something to tell you. Garrett looked at her, immediately attentive. What is it? I'm pregnant again, Diana said, watching his face carefully. The doctor confirmed it today when I went into town. We're going to have another baby, probably sometime in March or April. Garrett's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, joy, wonder, before he let out a whoop of happiness and pulled her into his arms, careful of her body. That's wonderful, Diana. That's the best news. Daniel's going to be a big brother. Are you sure you're happy? Diana asked, needing the reassurance. I know it's soon, and we'll have our hands full with two so close together. I'm thrilled, Garrett assured her, pulling back to look into her eyes. I want a house full of children with you, Diana. I want this place to ring with laughter and life. Every child we have is a blessing, and I'll love this new baby just as much as I love Daniel. Diana believed him because Garrett had never once given her reason to doubt his word. This baby, conceived in love within their marriage, would be welcomed just as Daniel had been, with open arms and full hearts. The seasons turned again, winter arriving with its challenges and beauties. Diana's pregnancy progressed smoothly this time, her body knowing what to expect. She was busier than ever, caring for Daniel, who was now walking and getting into everything, managing the household, and preparing for the new arrival. But she was deeply happy, surrounded by love and security. In late March, Diana went into labor in the middle of the night. Garrett rode hell for leather into town to fetch the doctor, while Red stayed with Diana, keeping her calm and comfortable. By the time Garrett returned with Dr. Mason, Diana was well into active labor. This birth was faster than Daniel's, and by dawn, they had a daughter. A girl, Diana breathed, looking down at the tiny baby with her shock of dark hair and rosebud mouth. Garrett, we have a daughter. She's perfect, Garrett said, his voice thick with emotion. Just like her mother. What should we call her? They'd chosen several names, waiting to see the baby before deciding. Looking down at her daughter's peaceful face, Diana knew immediately. Sarah Grace, after your grandmother Sarah, and Grace for the gift she is to us. Sarah Grace Miller, Garrett repeated, testing it out. It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. He kissed Diana's forehead gently. Thank you for our family, my love. Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Life with two small children was chaotic and exhausting, but it was also filled with more joy than Diana had imagined possible. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything and bringing her toys constantly. The ranch hands continued to be devoted uncles, each of them taking turns entertaining the children and helping however they could. As Sarah grew from infant to baby to toddler, and Daniel from toddler to little boy, the ranch prospered. Garrett's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to expand their land holdings and improve the house further. They added a wing with 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, preparing for what they both hoped would be an even bigger family someday. Miguel visited regularly, and on his 20th birthday, he announced that he was leaving their father's ranch to work for Garrett. The 2 men shook hands firmly, and Miguel moved into the bunkhouse, becoming part of the operation. It healed something in Diana to have her brother close again, to see him finding his own path away from their father's harshness. Elena's visits continued, and gradually she brought news that suggested their father was softening slightly. He never asked about Diana directly, but he stopped forbidding the family from mentioning her. It was a small change, but Elena insisted it was progress. 2 years after Sarah was born, Diana found herself pregnant again. This time, the news was met with celebration from everyone. Daniel, now 4, declared he wanted a brother to play with. Sarah, just 2, didn't quite understand, but picked up on the excitement around her. In December, during the first snowfall of the season, Diana gave birth to another son. The labor was her easiest yet, and the baby was healthy and strong. They named him Thomas Henry, and while Diana had initially hesitated to use that first name given her history, Garrett had argued persuasively that she shouldn't let her ex-lover steal a perfectly good name. Thomas Henry would be called Henry anyway, and he would make that name entirely his own. The house that had once seemed too large for a lonely bachelor now rang with the sounds of children playing, laughing, arguing, and growing. Garrett thrived as a father, patient and loving with all 3 children. He taught Daniel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, took Sarah on gentle trail rides on the most docile horses, and carried baby Henry in a sling while doing lighter ranch work. On a spring evening when Daniel was 6, Sarah was 4, and Henry was 6 months old, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It had become their tradition, this evening gathering, a way to mark the end of the day and connect as a family. Diana sat in the rocking chair with Henry, nursing contentedly, while Garrett sat on the porch rail with Sarah on his lap, and Daniel leaning against his knee. "Tell us the story," Daniel demanded, as he did almost every evening. "The story about how you and Mama met." It was his favorite tale, this story of how their family began. Garrett and Diana exchanged glances, smiling at their son's persistence. Garrett began, as he always did. "Well, it was an October day, and I was riding back from town when I saw a lady on the side of the road who needed help." Diana picked up the narrative. "And even though I was a stranger, your father stopped to help me. He took me to his ranch and gave me a job and a place to stay, even though he didn't know me at all." "Because you were kind and brave," Daniel interjected, having heard this enough times to know all the details. "And then you fell in love." "We did," Garrett confirmed, reaching over to take Diana's free hand. "Best decision I ever made, stopping to help your mother that day. Because it brought me all of you." Sarah, who was younger but just as invested in the story, asked her usual question. "And we all lived happily ever after?" Diana looked around at her family, at her husband who loved her unconditionally, at her children who were healthy and happy, at the home they'd built together from nothing. She thought about the scared, desperate woman she'd been that October day. Certain her life was over. She'd had no way of knowing that her ending was actually a beginning, that losing everything would lead her to gain more than she'd ever dreamed possible. "Yes, sweetheart," Diana said softly, tears of gratitude and joy in her eyes as she met Garrett's loving gaze. "We all lived happily ever after." And they did. Garrett and Diana went on to have 2 more children over the years, another daughter they named Elena after Diana's mother, and a final son called James. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the valley. Miguel eventually married a girl from town and built his own house on ranch land, staying close to his sister. Elena, after their father's death when Diana was 32, finally came to live with them, spending her final years surrounded by the grandchildren she adored. Diana's younger siblings, Sophia and Carlos, sought her out as soon as they were old enough, and both became regular fixtures in the Miller household. The family gatherings were loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect, everything Diana had never had growing up, and everything she'd wanted to give her own children. Red, Carlos Mendoza, and Ben all remained with the ranch for years, becoming not just employees but true family. They were uncles to the Miller children, advisors to Garrett, and dear friends to Diana. When Red finally retired in his 60s, Garrett built him a small cottage on the property, so he'd always have a home. The town of Westcliff grew and changed over the years, but the Miller Ranch remained a constant, a place known for its prosperity, its hospitality, and the love that was evident in every corner. People spoke of Garrett and Diana Miller with respect and admiration, their story of how they'd found each other becoming something of a local legend. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Garrett took Diana back to the spot where they had first met, that stretch of road where she'd been kneeling behind a juniper bush, sick and terrified and alone. They stood there hand in hand, remembering that day and marveling at how far they'd come. "If I could go back and talk to that scared girl," Diana said softly, "I'd tell her that everything was going to be all right, better than all right. I'd tell her that the best days of her life were ahead of her, not behind her." "If I could go back," Garrett said, pulling her close, "I'd tell that younger version of myself to fall in love with you even faster, because every moment with you has been a gift. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Diana. You turned a house into a home and made me understand what it means to have a family." They kissed there, beside the road where their story began, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and built a life filled with light. Around them, the Colorado landscape stretched out in all its harsh beauty, the same mountains and valleys and endless sky that had witnessed their first meeting, now watching over their enduring love. As they rode back to the ranch together, toward the home that waited with children and grandchildren gathering for the anniversary celebration, Diana reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd been thrown away by her father, abandoned by the man she'd thought she loved, stripped of everything she'd known. But in losing everything, she'd found what really mattered. She'd found Garrett, who'd looked at her with kind eyes and said, "My ranch has room for you both." She'd found a love that was real and lasting, built on respect and partnership and genuine affection. She'd found herself stronger and braver than she'd ever known she could be. The years would continue to bring their share of challenges and sorrows, as all lives do. There would be hard winters and difficult losses, children's illnesses that terrified them, and ranch problems that tested Garrett's skills. But through it all, Diana and Garrett would face everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. They would grow old side by side, their hands always finding each other, their hearts forever intertwined. And on quiet evenings when the work was done, and the children were settled, and the Colorado stars blazed overhead in their millions, Diana would sometimes think back to that dusty October afternoon when she'd lost everything and gained the world. She'd think about the cowboy who'd stopped to help a stranger and ended up becoming her whole heart. She'd think about the family they'd built, the life they'd created, and the love that had sustained them through everything. She would look at Garrett, still handsome even with silver threading through his hair, and she would thank whatever forces had brought them together. Because some love stories don't begin with a prince sweeping in on a white horse. Some begin with a desperate woman on a dusty road and a kind man who simply said there was room. And those stories, built on compassion and choice rather than destiny, are sometimes the most beautiful of all. Theirs certainly was, a story that started with an ending and became a beginning, a story that started with loss and became a legacy of love that would echo through generations. Their children would tell their children about Garrett and Diana Miller, about how they met and how they loved. And those grandchildren would tell their own children, keeping alive the story of the cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him right back. It would become family legend, passed down through the years, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, and that true love is built not on perfection, but on choosing each other, every single day, no matter what comes. Diana and Garrett Miller lived long, full lives surrounded by love and family. When they finally passed, many years later, and within months of each other, as longtime married couples often do, they were laid to rest in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch they'd built together. Their graves sat side by side, just as they'd lived, and on the shared headstone was carved simply, "Together, they built a life of love." And that was the truest epitaph anyone could have written, the perfect end to a story that had begun with such desperation and grown into something beautiful beyond measure. They had indeed built a life of love, Garrett and Diana Miller, and in doing so, they'd created something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. They'd created a family, a legacy, and a love story for the ages.